Beautiful hump day beer, just what the doctor ordered. And I guess I could think, what's better than Heineken? Well, how about the 710 milliliter Heineken? Beer on an economy size. I could say it's a family size beer, but then that would imply that the whole damn family has to drink. And I'm sure that doesn't apply to a lot of people, so let's leave it at that. Cheers. Mm. And so on this hump day for maximum humpage, I decided to go for a second round after that can of beer. One Belgueule Rubis, the box style amber that you get in the winter pack for, the 15 pack that's around. Not a bad one if you enjoy kind of strongish. But yeah, once again, if you remember the last vlogs I made, I did mention that as much as I enjoy my cooking and my beer drinking, I try to do a little bit more than that. Even though this is like a good platform for me to spew my cheesy jokes from time to time. Okay, I'll admit, I kind of like pornography. Don't look at me that way. I'm talking about The Cure. Or in some cases, sticking my foot in my mouth. I try to be educational on occasion too. So with that in mind, I'm sure if you own a house or whatnot, you probably think of ways that you could cut down your expenses. And the fact that it's in winter now, that we're starting to get snow, it's going to get cold, you're wondering, how can I save some money? And while some of these measures are good for, protecting the environment and such, obviously the big picture is you want to save money on some utilities and therefore make your house a little bit more comfortable. So while there's some stuff that's definitely going to be a bit time consuming and maybe some big projects, there are a few small things you can do and you can look out for to try to make things a bit more energy efficient, and all the money you would give to Hydro Quebec, you put back in your pocket instead. So I want to show around some of the stuff I've tried to do, and here's a few tips that you may be able to enjoy and put to use. Stick around, everyone. So first up, with the holiday season that's just around the corner, I decided to get the tree up in the living room over here, just so I could say happy holidays and ho ho freaking ho. Now that that's out of the way, one of the things you could look at too, if you want to try to save on your electricity bill, is weather stripping and air sealing. If you're a smartass out there, you have a really bad sense of humor, let me just get this out of the way. No, weather stripping does not mean you're doing a striptease out in various forms of weather. Sunshine striptease, snowfall striptease, rainfall striptease. Don't do it. In fact, you're probably going to get arrested for that too. Or, well, let's not go into that direction. But no, it's simple enough. Weather stripping is actually what you apply to the doors and to the windows, to the movable parts that would give yourself an airtight seal. And there's a lot of little places you could look at too when you're trying to do the weather stripping, such as on a door. I'm going to be opening this up, and as a result, I'm going to be freezing my ass off for everyone's benefit. Wow, that's got to be a first time I say that. So weather stripping essentially is like this foam that's right over here whenever you close the door. So what that does is whenever you close the door over here, it gives it a nice tight seal. So this will close up over here to prevent any gaps from air from the outside coming into your house. You want to make sure it's in good shape, and if not, that could be easily replaced. You could get basically foam tubing that you could tape up here, you can nail it, or they make these kits that are adhesive with the magnetic strip on a regular door frame. It's really simple to do. So while most of these weather stripping techniques are mostly used for winter time, they also apply to the summer too. So it goes in and out. Here's a quick example. You're going to have warm air and you're going to have cold air depending on the time of the year. Warm air by nature always wants to gravitate towards cold air. Most people will focus more on the winter than the summertime because take a look at your hydroelectricity bill and you'll notice that most of your consumption is going to be in the wintertime. It may be because of some lighting that you're using, because when it gets darker a bit earlier, you're using more lights, but it's actually because of heating. At least whatever you pay in a year in electricity, at least half of that goes towards heating alone. So imagine this, you're spending at least half of your hydro bill on heating up your house, and you might have ways that cold air is going to penetrate in. So if cold air gets in, that translates to heat loss. Your heaters, your furnace is going to be working a lot harder, and as a result, you're using a lot more money to try to keep your house warm. So air sealing, weather stripping is one way you can do it. But then, with regards to the door with the weather stripping there, why would you worry about that? Well, here's an interesting fact that I learned from reading up on the Department of Energy from the US. Imagine this on this measuring tape. Going from 5 to here, like in between my thumbs, is the equivalent of 1/8 of an inch. So if you're going around your entire door and you have 1/8 of an inch crack around it, how much cold air is coming in? This is actually something I didn't realize. So take a small window like this, open it up halfway, you're getting the same amount of air there from all those cracks. You'd be surprised how much cold air gets in from here. It's like an infestation. Well, not like an infestation of rats. That shit's nasty. Fucking cesspools. So that's why you want to keep an eye out for your weather stripping around the door. So then, easy way you could tell there's a problem with your weather stripping is put your hand around it. Not on top of the door, but just right around the edges of it. If you're feeling any cold air coming in, you know you have a part that you're going to have to seal up. And that's just the weather stripping. There is another part that should be replaced too on that door. So while we cover the weather stripping, there is another section to worry about, which is the door sweep or the door bottom. Obviously that you can't have weather stripping over here on the bottom because the way the door moves, you have to keep it mobile. So this thing over here is a door sweep that interacts with the threshold at the bottom or the bottom of the door frame to keep it tight and sealed. One way you can know that you have to replace it, besides the fact there's going to be wear and tear on this, is look on the bottom. Obviously, it's hard to tell at nighttime, but during the day, if you see any daylight peering out from underneath, or even for that matter, any daylight peering out from the sides of the door, that means you have an air gap and an air leak where it has to be sealed up properly. Luckily, this is an easy fix too that you can do. Alright, so that's doors that you have to worry about. The next part is with windows. My windows are originals, so those have already been, had decades of wear and tear coming up. So the best way to do it, like the best thing to do, is eventually to replace the windows. Of course, if you have like 10 originals in here, you're looking at, a few $1,000s in repairs for a contractor. So you could probably spread that out over time in order to make it more efficient. But there are some things you can do to help out a little bit. Okay, so on a window, it's a cold surface at times, but then you could always tell if there's any air leaking coming in or if there's a draft by a simple thing, condensation. Remember when I said that warm air always wants to gravitate to the cold air? Well, what happens is whenever you have warm air that gravitates to a cold surface, the result is this moisture that develops at the bottom over here. It's going to be impossible to eliminate it completely, but you want to reduce it as much as possible. Reason being, if you have that condensation, that's moisture, humidity, that if it sets onto your caulking, to your window frame or whatever, it's going to cause a bit of rot over time and deteriorate it. So you don't want that eating into it. Oof, that beer's coming up right now. So some of the caulking over here was original that was deteriorating or was redone. So what I did was I took this amount here peeled off the old one and then reapplied it with a nice layer of silicone. Doesn't seem to be completely perfect, but it's still better than nothing. A partial reduction in air infiltration does better. And then over here, there's a bit of a gap at the bottom from where the window's going to be coming in. Normally, there's like a felt weather stripping on the interior on where it slides, but in case that weakens up over time, there might be some air leaking over here. Now, what I had done was I'd taken a little material called backer rod. Backer rod is this stuff over here. It's like these foam tubes. They could come in 1/2 inch diameter, 1 inch diameter, 3/4 inch diameter, or whatever. The idea is it's like a temporary caulking. You just fill in the gap over here, press it in, and what I had done is I had actually cut up a few pieces so that's really tight. With all that pressure over here, it blocks it up, makes it more energy efficient so there's less air penetrating in. It's not always going to be the case because sometimes you're still going to have some air from other parts. Like this window. Oof, besides the chip paint, which I know I'm going to have to replace eventually, this over here is a gap that was in the original gasket. Trouble is that if you have a gap here where it kind of fell apart on this side, on the other side, not to mention on the exterior window, that's all going to result in gaps of air that come into the house. What I'd use to block this is another temporary caulking. This stuff is called like rope caulking. It's a bit like working with Play-Doh with like clay, and you get it for relatively cheap. Like this pack I got at the Canadian Tire for roughly $10, and it does wonders. You just peel it off, apply it to the gaps over here, and then it seals it in pretty tight. And the beauty is that it stays flexible all year round, no matter the temperature. You could probably take it off in the summertime, but you know what? I'd leave it there, because at least I won't have to worry about warm air getting into the house. And with that in mind, I seem to see a little bit of a deterioration on this side of the windowsill. Yeah, that's a good hotspot where air is going to be able to leak in. There is a bit of a trick to fixing that up, obviously. It's just using simple caulking, and here's the proper way that you caulk. Alright, so what you're going to need for that is a simple caulking gun and your choice of caulking. They make numerous types of materials out there. You got latex, acrylic, silicone, hybrid materials. Personally, I like to use silicone. It's a bit more durable, costs a bit more, but it's going to pay off a bit more over time. I find that acrylic and latex, they're paintable, but they seem to crack easily, so they're not going to be as long lasting. I have a cap over here to kind of keep it air sealed, just so it doesn't dry up. Now, something else you're going to need too is a glove. I like having these cheap nitrate gloves or latex gloves for doing this. That way, if you have to tool it, you won't have to dirty your hands. And I'll explain briefly what tooling means. Alright, time to load up the gun. If this thing looks familiar to you, then yeah, you know why. This is what I was using for my coffee table a little while back. These caulking guns can be used for so many utilities. Caulking, adhesives, they're pretty versatile. And yes, even you can do it yourself. You don't need to hire a professional for this kind of stuff. So once it's loaded, I'll just remove this. Son of a diddly. I'll get that later. So let's use this spot in this example. This part that has a bit of a gap. So I already had this cut to about 1/8 of an inch or so on a diagonal. And now I'm going to apply it. Just like that. So you fill it in on the gap, and then in order to tool it, it just means you take your finger, you press along the caulking, and then that'll push it in further into the hole to give it a tighter seal. The beauty of this stuff is that it's like rain ready in 30 minutes. So you can use it outside, and 30 minutes later, if it starts to rain, you're fine because it's not going to destroy it at all. But I'm not going to do the tooling just yet because I have a few more spots I want to hit. So yeah, tube of caulking that might cost you a little under $10, but it goes a long way to saving on your hydro bill. Yeah. And now, time to tool. And if you ever want to make sure this was on neat, like you didn't want it to stick out, You probably would put masking tape along here, just on the top and the bottom, so that when you tool it, you're able to peel it off, and then you're only going to have the strip that you weather stripped. Me, I don't care, because this is in such bad shape that I know I'm going to have to replace this window eventually. But this is a good way to try to keep it protected. There you go. Now you know how to caulk. There's usually condensation over here too, but luckily that's easy to patch up as well. Oops. Have to fix up the camera angle sometimes. Ooh. Minor explosion happened. I guess that's what happens when you work under pressure. Under pressure, what you done to me? Oops. Freddie Mercury. God, we lost him so early, didn't we? Such a shame. And so those are some ways you can seal up your windows and your doors, but there's other kind of weather stripping you can use. There's also this stuff here. It's another kind of a foam rubber, or a foam insulation. The way this one works is that you're able to press on it, it expands with heat, and it's actually able to stick to some pretty uneven surfaces. There's some applications you could use this for, but there's one application this is really handy to use on. So the best thing you can use that foam weather stripping on is something like an attic hatch. Like, I realized last year that when I was looking at it, it was just this piece of wood on top of this wooden frame over here. The issue is that whenever you have wood on wood, metal on metal, that's not an airtight seal. So any air that's coming in to the attic is going to be seeping into your house. So what I had done is I took that, laid a layer of it around here to give it more of an airtight seal. So when I press down on it and then it presses back up, it's going to stick and going to be sticking there all year round. So yeah, something that costs like maybe $25, but it pays off in dividends for what you're saving on that. Ugh. Here I am on my hands and knees right now. God, this is kind of embarrassing. But I'm ready to go explore a giant gaping hole over here. Okay, that sounds kind of dirty. Whatever. So, here's something else I learned too. You may have noticed that there will be a draft coming out of your electrical outlets. Well, that's actually kind of normal, because I've heard another stat that 2 to 5% of the air infiltration in a house actually comes from that. And it's a really logical idea when you think about it. Your wall's going to be insulated, except around the electrical box where the outlets, the switches are, especially on your outside walls where you're going to have the outside air here. So without the insulation, air is going to seep in uninhibited. But there is a way to block it off too. You go to the hardware stores and get these foam insulating pads, punch it out, remove the cap, put this on, and then you cover it up again, and it seals it nice and tightly. It won't eliminate the entire draft, but it'll get the majority out of the way. Funny, you learn something new every day, you know? I should probably get off my knees because I feel like an idiot now. Alright, so we've covered doors, windows, electrical outlets apparently, and even attic hatches. If you're feeling a bit more advanced and you want to take on even more, there are some other things you can look at too for air sealing. That would be within your ceiling. A tip I learned that I didn't even realize was a thing was spiders like to create their webs whenever there's some kind of air circulation around. So obviously I'm going to need to get a dust rag, but that's a pretty clear indication that one area that air is infiltrating from is around the light fixture. Yeah, that's actually a pretty common thing because air sealing from the ceiling is more of a relatively recent thing, I think. Like, it never would have existed in 1973 when this came up. But it's simple enough. You just take like caulking or spray foam, go around the box that's on the inside, and then that seals it up properly. Just remember, because it's an electrical fixture up there, you need to use what's called fire blocking caulking or spray foam for security purposes. Well, actually, it all does the same trick, but fire blocking is orange color so that when you do an inspection, they see it's air sealed with the electrical stuff properly. And there's a lot of little things too, like, to give you an example, let's say you have this wire that's going through a wall or like a ceiling and they have a gap like around this much. That could also be sealed up with the same kind of spray foam too. Because while air is going to travel through the like sealing other materials, naturally, having a hole is basically an air leak where it's going to get through. Another thing to consider too for a more advanced project, in case you ever see condensation on your ceiling. I've had this over here in my house numerous times before I even realized what the issue was. And from what I could gather, there's actually a few causes of that. Well, there's no condensation now, but I know some spots get it. But there's a few things to keep in mind is A, your attic insulation may not be enough, or it may not be contacting the ceiling whatsoever from up above. So that means that that's a huge gap where cold air can penetrate through, get to the ceiling, so then when warm air rises, that's going to be a cold spot, and essentially going to get condensation that happens. So that should be cleared up. Other causes could be obviously the air sealing, a problem that we had discussed before in the fixtures and whatnot, or it could just be a problem of humidity around the house. If you know you have high humidity, temporary fix would be get a dehumidifier to get rid of the excess amount. If you want to know what excess is, well, look at it this way. The ideal amount of relative humidity you should have in your house is between 35% and 60% before you have any kind of health concerns. Anything under 35 means it's going to be dry, and you might get excessive nosebleeds from time to time. Nobody likes a bleeding nose. Hell, that's why they have a nosebleed section up in stadiums, to keep them away from it. But then if you have a lot above 60%, there's a chance that that could lead to mold problems down the line or mildew. And you don't want to have that happening. Because if that happens on, let's say, wood, then it's like mildew, mold can appear, and then as a result, that could lead to wood rot, deterioration, and a couple of expensive repairs to do, and you really don't want that. The dehumidifier is perfect enough in order to do a temporary job, but your best case scenario down the line is to eventually find what the source of humidity is and fix it up. And while I know I have a humid house, I do have some other projects lined up like I've shown or at least spoken about before. Like I'm in the process of redoing my attic insulation as we speak, but my issue is that I'm thinking, how the fuck am I going to get this camera up there to show it from start to finish? Because I had like one or two requests that want to see a reno done from beginning to end. Ideally, I would like to do that, but it might not be feasible as a one-man band. But I'll see what happens too. I'll show you all a little bit later if I can. All right, and on that note, I should probably be ending this very soon. So to reiterate, air sealing, weather stripping, caulking, you name it, those are all little things you can do. Things you can pick up at hardware stores easily for a couple of bucks, but it's going to go a long ways to saving on your energy bill all year round, especially in the winter when we use most of our electricity. And once again, if I can try to get my camera upstairs into the attic, I can try to show my project from start to finish, to show that one. Because that's one thing. If you're to focus on one part of your house, it's your attic too, because that's going to save you the most amount of money. And I'm not talking about a couple bucks a year. If done properly, it could save you a couple $100 a year. That's how much of an impact it has. But we'll see. Till next time, this is the Wandering Yuki, signing off from the Handyman's Cheese Cafe Corner. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button, hit a like, send me a comment, send me a request, tell me to go and I'll just say again, and then we'll take it from there. Thanks everyone, have a good night.